Hello, this is PTTGRW, and welcome to episode 1 of my Kerbal Space Program Let's Play series. Now, last time we ended with taking Jebediah to a real fast mission to the moon. Unfortunately, it was a premature mission, and we got the note of the Kerbal Space Center to talk to us, and basically they're unhappy. And what they want us to do is set up some satellites. Now, in between this episode and the last one, I ran around a couple more biomes on Kerbin, just simple shuttle launches, parachute, land, get science, and I got myself about 109 science, because as you remember, I bought these two, or not bought, I got these two science unlocks, and the one I really need is this one, because it has the science lab, and we're going to need to bring this to some other planets to take detailed surface samples, so we know exactly what kind of material we might be dealing with down there. But we're going to unlock that one. And because the Kerbal Space Center wants us to build some satellites, how about I go do that, and I'll meet you guys on the launch pad. Now, what we've got here is a rather unique looking rocket, to be honest. I used some of the Mobius Rocket Works engine couplers, basically these radio flanges, which are meant to attach to the bottom of fuel tanks, except I inverted them and stuck a couple of probes on them. And surprisingly enough, this will actually launch pretty well, even with this odd aerodynamic structure. But anyhow, SAS on, throttle up some, and go. Now, the debris back there is just from in between episodes, me checking out the shores biome for some science. Burning through the liquid fuel a bit faster than solid fuel. But this is our way of basically making the Kerbal Space Center, the people that rule that, a little bit happier with us, because Jebediah here was sent off on a rather premature mission to the moon, and they wanted us to have some satellite coverage before we do something like that again. So, this is our mission. We're going to launch 3 satellites into orbit, and we're going to put them on pretty much all equatorial orbits, but we'll adjust them slightly for each one, just so we can have some satellite coverage. And once we get that up, we're going to probably do a quick trip low over the moon to grab even more science. So we're just going to be starting our gravity turn a little bit late and staging off these solid rocket boosters. There was an explosion, however it did not damage any of our core spacecraft, and we'll be back once I get this into a stable orbit. Now we're in a stable orbit. We went around the dark side of the planet, so I just waited a moment till we're back here, but about 150,000 meter orbit, or 150 kilometer, and now it's time to start decoupling these. So we're just going to decouple them one by one from our main ship here. There, and they're going to slowly drift away, as all things do in space. And once we get a sufficient distance apart, I'm going to throttle up and bring Jebediah back, and we will deal with these probes once he's nice and safe. Ooh, and there we go. Clear of the probes. Now we're just going to deorbit here. That's pretty quick. A lot of thrust from this engine from KW Rocketry, along with the nice 2.5 meter parts. Get them pretty early in game with this mod, so it's quite nice. Makes it a lot easier to get some of the larger ships into orbit. Now, I did bring some science in hopes that I might be able to grab some here. Although it looks like I already... oh, I get that one. Looks like I already did most of the science that I can do. Need to find out what mod's adding all that text so I can try to get rid of it, because that's getting a bit in the way, and I already know I have the EVA report, so this is set to deorbit. We're not going to need that stage. We'll deorbit in a much lighter fashion. Just the camera a little bit better. And continue on down. And we have a pretty standard descent. In all honesty, we probably could just do a hard landing with the engine. We have more than enough fuel. But just to play it safe and a lot easier, we're just going to be using the parachute. Moment to admire those clouds. I really do love how the physics frame of reference works with those, as I mentioned in the first video. But we'll be back with the probes now that Jebediah is safe. And now that we've got Jebediah safely returned home, we're going to position our probes. Now, these guys just have a small fuel tank, small engine, 8 solar panels, a battery, and a couple communitrons. So they are really just a basic probe, just to give us kind of insight on what a place looks like. We'll activate our engine, and going to say with this one, we're just going to put it in a higher orbit. Instead of changing the inclination, we're just going to push it into a bit of a higher orbit. Probably about 500,000. We'll time accelerate out there just to circularize our orbit. There we go. Rotate around. Now this craft has 5 units of torque from the MechJeb capsule here, and because it's so small with that much torque, it actually gets a huge amount of turning ability, meaning it's very precise with the SAS and has quite nice turning skills. I always liked that about small craft, how they're so easy to maneuver, although when we get into some of the bigger craft later on, like our space stations, those will be a misery to have to reorient. But we have this probe where we want it, and the last thing we need to do is name it. So, rename vessel. We're just going to call this probe 1, be as generic as we can. And let's go pick another one to start positioning. Now I'm just going to speed through 4 times editing speed to changing the positions of these probes, because I'm sure you all know how to change orbits. It's pretty simple. You just burn toward the north vector and then toward your periapsis to basically keep yourself from going too high. And you can see that I'm burning towards the north vector now, and checking the apoapsis is a little bit high, so I burn towards the retrograde and bring it back into circularize. And I rename that one probe 2, and this one I'm going to be calling probe 3, which we take a similar approach. Both are at about a 30-degree incline up, and this one goes down. But these probes are going to actually become multi-purpose, and we'll be using them as impact probes for the seismic scanner once we unlock it and they become obsolete. But for now, we've got our 3 probes. So let's head to the Space Center and start, well, first the science I gathered from Jebediah. Let's go see if we can spend that on anything. Then we're going to go and plan our mission for the moon. What do we have? 56. This is the only thing we can get. However, this is quite useful because it does give us some fairings, which we're going to really need. And it gives us the KOS scripting service system, so we can start playing around with that. We also get MechJeb, so I think this will definitely be something we're going to grab, mostly because of the fairings. I haven't played it enough with KOS to make good use of it, but I'm going to build us a vessel that can get us to the moon, nice and close to the moon, and I'll be right on the launch pad. Sometimes I think I try to be as inefficient as I possibly can. Now, for this trip to the moon, we're being optimistic, bringing 2 science labs and 2 goo canisters, hoping that we can get near the moon science. Now, I do know of a staging flaw I have here, where I decouple something a little early, so we'll fix that, and throttle up and let's go. Now, I could have built this a lot smaller and a lot less. I didn't need to use the double wide, but typically if I'm building a rocket, I'll overdo it. It just seems to be the way I go, you know, kind of the saying, go big or go home. Well, sometimes I make the rocket a bit excessive with what it needs, especially with way more delta V than it needs. I have enough delta V to probably get me to Duna if I'm conservative enough with it, but I'm only going to the moon. Anyhow, the reason we need these preliminary reports is because we believe that the moon has liquid, some type of liquid on it, that we need to first scan around the moon to see if we can find a place to land, and then we need to get some surface samples to try to prove this theory. But for now, we need to focus on what's at hand, such as our gravity turn. Try to get into orbit so we can head out to the moon with Jebediah yet again. He is our trusted pilot. He can do anything he wants. But that's what you get when you are one of the veteran members of the Kerbal space program. And detach these, and of course one breaks, as it always seems to do. Those are out. Next set. And the main reason I'm using Kerbal, the flight engineer here, is because I like being able to just read these numbers off without having to go into the map view constantly to make sure everything's going right. It's just easier to look at my apoapsis and periapsis, and then along with the time to the two to see when I need to burn and such. It's a lot more convenient. MechJeb has the same type of module, just I kind of like just having the informational display. We're just going to wait until we're closer to our apoapsis because we have enough thrust to do so that we won't miss it, and it's more efficient the higher up we are to try to get our orbit. And as you can see, we are just completing our burn into a nice stable orbit so we can begin planning our maneuver to the moon. Right on the first try, we get just real quick, we get a moon periapsis of less than 50 kilometers. And we just finish up trimming we begin to time accelerate around the planet, and we begin finishing our burn so that we can get our moon encounter. Only to note that it goes a little bit wrong once we start customizing our toolbar, because since this is indeed a new save, we have a couple of mods that we still need to configure, such as the toolbar. And you see me just customizing that right now. And then I notice something terribly wrong. Lock it, and we're just going to not disable that. We're going to open this up, and we'll just add a real quick alarm so that we don't miss that. Day changes in a day. It's going to take us a day to get out there. Do I even have enough food to... No, I do not have enough food to last a day. So as I writhe in fury that Jebediah does not have enough food and this mission must be aborted, I start playing with maneuver nodes to get our encounter a bit earlier. And I met with some success. After a couple minutes of manipulating the nodes, I get a better encounter. Now it's only because we have the delta V am I considering this. But this is a pretty risky maneuver to do. Oh yeah, we have way more than enough delta V for this. However, what I'm aiming for is if I can just get around the moon, it should be easy enough. And as we see, I am just playing with the maneuver nodes more, trying some more burns, just making a good attempt to get this encounter a lot earlier so that Jebediah does not starve on this mission. Because I do want to go through with this mission. We already launched this giant craft, as inefficient as it was, and we want our science. But, alas, we finally do get an encounter, and a pretty decent one at that. We are driving the game completely crazy. How much Delta V? This is going to take us, what, 3 hours? That is not too bad. And we are still sitting on a ton of Delta V. So, now that we've situated this so Jebediah doesn't starve before you can come home, let's see if we can't actually make this work. Now this is going to use a lot of Delta V to slow down, especially in time, so like I said, we don't starve. But it should still prove a pretty entertaining challenge. Now I'm going to go for about 9,000 meters on my periapsis here, because I know that the moon has 7,000 meter tall cliffs, and if I go any lower than that, then I'm almost guaranteeing to slam into one. So, go back and bring up the surface menu so I can see how high up we are, actually. This would be better. Timed periapsis. When we're going on the dark side. Well, this will make it a little bit of a challenge to see everything. Oh, there we go. Slow it down. And it's time to collect our science. See what we can get. Near the moon, good. 75 from the materials bay. And 30, I believe, is what we're going to get. Yep, 30. We will grab our crew report as well. And flip this around so we have a little bit of light to work by. Pull Jebediah out, and he's going to give us a crew report, or an EVA report. Board in again, and once we get just under 10,000, we should be able to work on the science in one of the biomes, flying over it. So 30 seconds till periapsis. Let's see, observe the goo container. Still just near the moon. We have a couple more seconds until our periapsis. See if we cannot get what we are looking for here. If we're not gonna get it now, then we probably won't be able to. And it's still just near the moon, so I'm just going to grab double of the science. We'll only get a little bit on the second iteration, but it's still more than nothing. So, now that we're here, let's see if the most efficient way to do this will probably be to slow down and let the moon kind of spin us in the direction, there we go, spin us in the direction we need to go. Now we still have more than 12 hours worth of food, water, and oxygen for Jebediah, so we're going to wait till the apoapsis, and then we're just going to thrust forward directly toward Kerbal. Just kind of using the gravity of the moon to assist us in our escape. And right here should be good. And tons of Delta V still. Just fire prograde. And this will force us right past the moon and straight at Kerbal. In which case we can watch our periapsis drop down until we're in, nope, it's going back up. Looks like we need to come out of the sphere of influence first. Now, I probably could just do that all in one maneuver, but it's easier this way. And now we need to fire. Prograde. Orbital mechanics are very fun in Kerbal Space Program, I must say. I do enjoy just being able to kind of float around in circles around all these different gravity wells. But we have collected some very important science that we are going to be needing for the future. And we have way more fuel than we needed. We even were being as inefficient as we probably could be, and we still have a whole nother stage. And we can see the sun rise over the side of Kerbin as we just trim our orbit to how we want to land, so we can land in the beautiful light of the sun rather than the cold dark. I'm already past my periapsis and going back up, but I do not want to be going back up because we don't have enough food for another full orbit. We've got about less than 4.5 hours worth of food, roughly, still on board for Jebediah. So we need to actually get to the ground this orbit, meaning with all this extra fuel we can provide a little assistance. From the atmosphere and the help of our engines, we are able to get our apoapsis low enough so we can be landing this run around the planet. And we will also be landing on the daylight side so we can actually see what we're doing. And even with more luck from such a horrible mission start, we find that we will be landing on land, not water. Now, I was confused for a second because I'm looking at this and seeing that I have not gone through a full day of the TAC life support food. However, let's get the parachutes out here first. Woo, this is going to be bad if we don't flip back around. Maybe? Oh, this could be bad. But, as I was saying, I was looking at the mission timer, and currently this mission has taken 3 days, 1 hour, and 20 minutes. And that's actually in Kerbin days. Now, I guess I'm not entirely sure how to set it back because everything's started running on Kerbin days, which is a 6-hour period, rather than Earth days, or Earth. One day is 24 hours on Earth, but it's only 6 hours on Kerbin, so everything's been running off Kerbin's days since the update 0.23.5. And because of that, we are seeing that we actually get 4 days, Kerbin days, worth of food per 1 unit of TAC life support, so that'll be an interesting conversion to think about. Although this might not be too bad because we're landing in water. Although water in Kerbal Space Program has never been known to really be nice. Oh, but we flip around because that main chute and its huge amount of drag that it does have. Actually, those are the side chutes. Those are some huge parachutes. I probably could have gone with the medium or small models, but I guess I wasn't entirely sure. Those really are massive. I wasn't entirely sure which ones I needed to be using because I'm, like I said, not familiar with the Real Shoots mod. And we finish our landing at an accelerated pace because we're only moving at 2.8 meters per second, and it took incredibly long to get this thing back on the surface to the point where we could recover it. But as we can see, we got 170 science from that mission, giving us a total of 181. Let's see what we can unlock. Now, if you had the original audio, you would hear me ramble about different sciences. However, since we are at the 25-minute mark, this is where we'll be wrapping up the video. Now, so far we did a very fun encounter with the moon that took a little bit of orbital mechanics to get right. But next episode, we will be landing on the moon for the first time and getting surface samples to confirm our theories about there being some strange liquids on the lunar surface. But until then, I am PTTGRW, signing out.